Hey guys! Welcome to the Father Matrix video series where we talk about men's issues and why 85% of all fathers leave divorce court feeling like they were just violated by a rabid porcupine with a vendetta. Believe me, I've been there. But what my ex didn't realize at the time was that the game wasn't over. I fought back and won. Why are there not more people talking about the pain fathers go through in custody battles? Divorce is never easy. It's a painful process that leaves scars on everyone involved. But for many fathers, the pain of divorce is amplified by a sense of deep injustice. They walk into the courtroom hoping for fairness, only to leave feeling cheated, unheard, and stripped of their rightful place in their children's lives. The statistics paint a bleak picture. 85% of fathers leave divorce court feeling like they've lost something precious, something irreplaceable. They've lost their children. I know this pain firsthand. I've been through the ringer of a bitter custody battle. My ex-wife and I fought tooth and nail, each of us convinced that we were acting in the best interests of our children. But the system, it seemed, had other ideas. I felt like I was up against an invisible wall, my voice drowned out by a system that seemed biased against fathers. The emotional toll was immense. It felt like my world was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But with knowledge, persistence, and a good strategy, I was awarded sole custody. To win any game, you need to know the rules. The family court system often seems shrouded in secrecy, biased against fathers from the outset. Let's rewind to the 1880s. Fathers were generally favored in custody battles as they were seen as the primary breadwinners. Women made up only 15% of the workforce, their role was primarily domestic. This societal structure shaped custody battles. But the winds of change were beginning to blow. The tender years doctrine favored mothers in custody disputes. It was a judicial interpretation influenced by social reformers, and so began a legal battleground disadvantaging fathers. The tender years doctrine cast a long shadow over family courts. The introduction of the tender years doctrine in the late 19th century marked a significant shift in the landscape of custody battles. This doctrine, borrowed from British law, posited that mothers were inherently better suited to care for young children, especially those under the age of 7. This belief stemmed from the prevailing notion of motherhood as a sacred duty, deeply intertwined with a woman's biological and emotional makeup. Prior to this, fathers were often favored in custody disputes due to their role as the primary breadwinner. But the tender years doctrine chipped away at this established norm, giving judges more discretion to award custody to mothers, even in cases where the father was deemed a fit and capable parent. This marked the beginning of a gradual but steady erosion of fathers' rights in family courts. This doctrine was not without its critics, even at the time. Many argued that it unfairly discriminated against fathers, reducing them to mere financial providers rather than active participants in their children's upbringing. Some legal scholars even questioned the constitutionality of the doctrine, arguing that it violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Despite these criticisms, the tender years doctrine took root in the American legal system, influencing custody decisions for decades to come. It became the bedrock upon which many mothers staked their claim for custody, often successfully. Here's where things get really interesting, and by interesting I mean frustratingly ironic. The tender years doctrine's bias against fathers remained unchallenged for nearly a century. It seemingly contradicted the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection. Ratified in 1868, the amendment predates the doctrine by over a decade. How could an arguably unconstitutional principle hold sway for so long? To be clear, the tender years doctrine was not legislation written by Congress, but a legal presumption in family court, giving judges absolute discretion to award mothers custody. To be clear, I'm not saying judges were paid off. However, for the part of government that is supposed to determine what is constitutional or not to blatantly use discretion to violate the rights of roughly 50% of the population is shady as hell and tyrannical. During this time, movements like the suffragette and early feminist movements were advocating heavily for women's rights. The doctrine was seen as a step towards equality for women in family law, challenging the traditional patriarchal family structure. But this progress for women came at the expense of fathers' rights. The legal system turned a blind eye to the doctrine's inequality, decades of legal challenges were needed for it to be deemed unconstitutional. Some argue the tender years doctrine was a result of judicial activism. Others say it reflected social norms. The persistence of the tender years doctrine raises questions about the judiciary's role and societal pressures. Was it judicial activism or a response to social norms? Likely it was both, plus a little bit of political corruption and Marxist ideology. The Industrial Revolution and women's rights movements reshaped society. The suffragette movement gained momentum, providing mothers a legal tool against patriarchal structures. Judges, influenced by British political movements, saw mothers as better suited for child rearing. The Communist Manifesto and the Family Unit. Let's dive into the influence of radical ideologies on the American family. Communism has historically sought to dismantle traditional societal structures, including the family unit. In 1848, Marx and Engels published the Communist Manifesto, calling for the abolition of the family. They saw the family as a pillar of capitalist society, perpetuating inequality and oppression. Children inherited their parents' social standing, solidifying class divides. The family, especially in its patriarchal form, limited women's economic opportunities. After the release of the Communist Manifesto, intellectuals and academics around the world became intrigued by many of Marx's ideologies, which were greatly influenced by another German philosopher, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel advocated for a much stronger form of government, believing that government was primarily responsible for dictating the moral and ethical framework to its people in order better manage rational freedom. He also formulated what's called the Hegelian dialectic, which essentially takes two opposing ideas or forces, puts them in a UFC cage match to see which one ultimately wins. What this equates to is blacks versus whites, men versus women, rich versus poor, gays versus straights. Constant conflict will result in governmental intervention through laws, policies, and sometimes incarceration for those who don't play along. These conflicts are often seen and promoted through news media and in Hollywood to further divide and distract people from the real issue: communism. Did you know that the U.S. Socialist Party started in 1901 and by 1912 had over 113,000 members? By 1919, the Communist Party USA was founded in Chicago, Illinois. Socialist and communist ideologies were rapidly growing. In fact, we elected our first socialist president in 1912. Woodrow Wilson was a Hegelian scholar who expanded the American government with the administrative state and the Federal Reserve. The influence of communism, therefore, was shaping not only societal values, but also the very fabric of family law, leaving a lasting legacy on child custody practices in the United States. As we delve deeper into these historical shifts, it becomes evident how ideological battles and legal doctrines intertwined, shaping the experiences of countless families across generations. Section 2. The welfare state, unintended consequences, or calculated disruption. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, a time of significant social upheaval and change in the United States. President Lyndon B. Johnson launched his ambitious War on Poverty in 1964. This initiative aimed to address the root causes of poverty in America through a series of social programs and government interventions, expanding the welfare state. New programs provided financial assistance to low-income families, particularly single mothers. This created a situation where some women were financially better off remaining single and unmarried. As part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Congress commissioned a study to investigate educational disparities between predominantly white schools in affluent areas and predominantly black schools in poorer neighborhoods. The study, led by sociologist James Coleman, aimed to determine whether increased funding for schools in disadvantaged areas could bridge the achievement gap. The findings of the Coleman Report, published in 1966, shocked many and challenged the prevailing assumptions about education reform. The report found that school funding was not the primary driver of educational disparities. Instead, the report pointed to family background and structure as the most significant predictors of a child's academic success. Children raised in two-parent households, regardless of race or socioeconomic background, consistently outperformed their peers from single-parent homes. The report highlighted the importance of a stable and supportive home environment for a child's cognitive, social, and emotional development. This finding had profound implications for the debate surrounding family structure and its impact on children's well-being. It provided further evidence that children raised in fatherless homes faced significant disadvantages, not just in terms of academic achievement, but also in terms of their overall life outcomes. Children of single mother-led homes were more likely to have behavior issues and engage in delinquent activities that affected their ability to focus on their schoolwork. Despite these findings, policymakers often doubled down on existing welfare programs, further entrenching the cycle of single parenthood and its associated challenges. While the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a landmark achievement in the fight for racial equality, some of its provisions, particularly those related to welfare programs, had intended consequences that disproportionately impacted the Black community and family structure. The war on poverty, using a political smoke and mirror show, intentionally created a system that often penalized marriage and incentivized single motherhood. The structure of welfare programs often made it financially disadvantageous for couples to marry. Single mothers, often out of necessity, became increasingly reliant on government assistance, creating a cycle of dependency that was difficult to break. This dynamic, coupled with the mass incarceration of Black men in the decades that followed using additional liberal policies, decimated the Black family structure and had lasting repercussions on generations to come. The erosion of the family unit in many Black communities was not merely a byproduct of economic hardship, it was also in part a consequence of government policies that, while aiming to alleviate poverty, often undermined the very institution best equipped to lift people out of poverty, the family. This is not to say that all welfare programs are inherently flawed or that single mothers are incapable of raising successful children. However, it's crucial to acknowledge the vital importance of strong, intact families for the well-being of children and the health of communities. But in short, these Marxist-inspired policies were nothing short of social engineering tactics, using the Black community as guinea pigs, similar to what the government did during the Tuskegee experiment when they purposely gave Black men syphilis. The impact of the welfare state on family structure is undeniable. Prior to the 1960s, single-parent households were relatively uncommon in the United States. However, in the decades following the expansion of welfare programs, the number of children raised in single-parent homes skyrocketed. Today, over 35% of children in the United States live in single-parent households, which has had a profound impact on children's well-being. The statistical evidence overwhelmingly suggests that children raised in two-parent households have a significant advantage in life. The dismantling of the family structure, particularly in low-income communities, has had far-reaching consequences. What started as a war on poverty quickly morphed into a war on the family, particularly within marginalized communities. Unintended consequences of welfare programs created a cycle of disadvantage, difficult to break. Imagine a young boy growing up in a fatherless home, his mother struggling to make ends meet. He lacks a positive male role model and attends underfunded schools in a crime-ridden neighborhood. The odds are stacked against him from the start. More likely to drop out, get involved in crime, and end up incarcerated. The cycle continues. Another absent father perpetuating the cycle of poverty and incarceration. From the biased tender years doctrine to welfare policies, custody battles have a complex history. But today, has much changed? Not really. We've replaced gendered language with terms like the best interest of the child. Yet the system remains biased, disadvantaging fathers. Statistics show mothers win 85 to 90% of contested custody cases. Think about that. Even fit fathers lose most of the time. The best interest standard is subjective and often defaults to outdated stereotypes. The statistics on custody battles tell a troubling story, but the numbers alone don't capture the full extent of the problem. Behind the cold, hard data lies a system rife with systemic biases, perverse incentives, and even outright corruption. One particularly insidious practice that has come to light in recent years is known as case swapping. Here's how it works. Two divorce lawyers, often working in collusion, will agree to trade cases in a way that benefits them both financially. For example, one lawyer might agree to throw a custody battle in favor of the other lawyer's client, usually the mother, in exchange for a larger settlement in a different case. This unethical practice, while difficult to quantify, is widely acknowledged within legal circles and has been the subject of numerous investigations and exposés. It highlights the perverse incentives that exist within the family court system, where financial gain often trumps the best interests of the children involved. But even in cases where outright corruption isn't a factor, fathers often find themselves fighting an uphill battle against deeply ingrained biases within the judiciary. Judges, despite their claims of impartiality, are products of their time and upbringing. They, too, have been shaped by the same cultural norms and stereotypes that have traditionally favored mothers in custody disputes. Section 3. A glimmer of hope. Challenging the status quo. The current state of custody battles is undeniably bleak for many fathers. But there's a glimmer of hope on the horizon. A growing movement of fathers' rights advocates, legal scholars, and concerned citizens are challenging the status quo. They demand greater transparency and oversight in custody proceedings, including stricter ethical guidelines for lawyers and clear reasons for custody decisions. Educating fathers about their rights and empowering them is crucial. Challenging societal norms and promoting shared parenting arrangements is essential. But the methods used by most advocates are inadequate since they don't address the root cause. It would appear it was primarily for show and to profit from your hardship. Section 4. Restoring the family. A growing body of research highlights the benefits of shared parenting arrangements, where both parents have significant and meaningful time with their children after divorce or separation. Shared parenting, also known as joint custody, recognizes that children thrive when they have strong, loving relationships with both parents, even when those parents are no longer together. Studies have shown that children raised in shared parenting arrangements tend to have better emotional well-being, higher self-esteem, and stronger social relationships compared to children raised primarily by one parent. They also tend to perform better academically and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. Despite the evidence supporting shared parenting, the family court system often defaults to sole custody arrangements, with one parent designated as the primary custodial parent and the other granted visitation rights. This outdated model often leaves one parent, usually the father, feeling marginalized and disconnected from their children's lives. Promoting shared parenting as the default option in custody cases, except in cases where there is evidence of abuse, neglect, or other factors that would put the child's safety or well-being at risk, would be a significant step towards creating a more just and equitable family court system. It would send a powerful message that both parents are equally capable and deserving of being actively involved in their children's lives. So, where do we go from here? How do we dismantle the father bias and create a system that truly prioritizes the best interests of children by recognizing the vital importance of both parents? It starts with a collective awakening, a refusal to accept the status quo, and a commitment to fighting for change on both an individual and societal level. To the fathers battling this system, I say this: do not give up hope. Arm yourself with knowledge, seek out experienced legal counsel, document everything, build a strong support system, and never, ever stop fighting for your right to be a present and involved father. But it's not enough to fight individual battles. We need a collective movement demanding systemic change. We need to hold lawmakers accountable for creating policies that support strong, intact families, regardless of marital status. We need to demand greater transparency and oversight within the family court system, rooting out corruption and holding judges accountable for biased decisions. We need to challenge outdated societal norms and embrace shared parenting as the default option, recognizing that children thrive when they have loving and meaningful relationships with both parents. This is not a battle of fathers against mothers, as the communists want it to be. This is a battle for the hearts and minds of our children, for their right to experience the love and guidance of both parents, and for a society that values and supports fatherhood as the fundamental pillar of a healthy and thriving family structure. The time for change is now. So look, I understand many of you have been screwed over in the divorce process, and many of you are going through it now. It sucks. I get it. There has been an active war to destroy the family in order to expand government and usher in communism for the past 140 years. fathers are just caught in the crossfire. We have a lot of work to do, so I ask you to like, subscribe, and comment. Stay vigilant and stay safe. The next video is coming soon.